Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
While it wears many faces, bravery is one of the most valuable virtues, not only in life, but also in leadership. The presence of bravery leads to doers, dreamers, and great leaders. Here's a quote for you. The willingness to take action amid uncertainty, to do what is right over what's expedient, and to risk failing and falling short in the process. End quote from Forbes. Contrary to popular belief, bravery is a teachable skill and a learnable skill. And as HR leaders, we are the innovators of an organization. We are the front lines. We must illustrate this growth and innovation in ourselves so that we can inspire others. My guest today has dedicated her life to educating and entertaining international audiences on the topic of bravery for over a decade. I'm joined by Carole Schulter. She's the founder and CEO of the Brave Institute and international keynote speaker. She holds a BFA in theater production, an MA in communication, and 2 postgraduate certificates in coaching and mentoring. Living and traveling amongst 30 plus countries, she brings a broad perspective and meaning to the presence of being brave. Carole, welcome to the Workology Podcast.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, wow. You are just an international traveler. You're teaching people the skills that they need to be able to be brave in their life and their work. Can you give us a little bit more insight into your background? How did you get started in all this?
Well, to be honest, I didn't necessarily think that that's what I was going to do from the onset, but I've had the honor and privilege of working with, hundreds of women through the years. And I mean, both men and women, we all need to be brave. But women specifically, for some reason, they hold themselves back and they play smaller and they don't recognize that they have so much more to give than they often give themselves credit for. And so, witnessing so many brilliant, talented women play small or live in what I call the Dr. Seuss waiting place, waiting to feel good enough, waiting to feel ready, waiting for the perfect moment to magically arrive or all their ducks to be in a row before they do the thing or take that first step. And I realized that we all need some extra cheerleading. We all need some extra help and that push to say, no, like you're ready now. It's never going to be the perfect moment. And sometimes it's the smallest things that can make the biggest difference. And as you said, bravery really can be taught. And there are some small strategies and small actions that we can take to really get out of our own way and start creating and living on the path that we really see for ourselves, where we're ultimately going to make the most influence and have the biggest impact and feel the most fulfilled too.
I love that you're talking about all this. And we've done a series last year where I talked about women in leadership. And that was one of the things that I've seen in myself is playing small and waiting for that right moment. And so I love that we're covering this topic because you shouldn't have to play small. You should get out there and follow your passions or your dreams or whatever it is that you are interested in having your life take you on that certain path.
Absolutely. And it's a journey. It's not as if one day you're like, okay, and now I'm ready and, I'm going to be brave. It's a choice that you have to make on a regular basis. And to be honest, one of the biggest reasons I'm so passionate about this is because, I was that woman who didn't believe in myself and wasn't going after what I really wanted. But luckily, I always had one person who did, who was my mom. And unfortunately, she got really ill. I eventually moved back home to look after her. Felt purpose for the first time in my life, finally didn't feel like I wasn't good enough or tall enough or blonde enough or pretty enough or whatever it was. And then when she passed away, I, lost my number one fan, my purpose in me, all in one big big fail swoop. So I ended up taking a few years to sort of find myself again. I did a lot of traveling or escaping abroad, really volunteering at HIV positive orphanages in Thailand, and then with Mother Teresa's Missions of Charity in Calcutta. I lived in an ashram. I practiced intense yoga meditation. I shaved my head, raised thousands of dollars for cancer. I met a man, moved into his van, went apple picking New Zealand, did a whole lot of soul searching, and realized that I was, for the outside world, may have looked brave and courageous. And yes, I could take off and live in various places, but I wasn't actually brave enough to face life without that one person who believed in me. And so my journey has been about, how can I be brave myself? How can I stop needing that external validation and trust that I have what it takes to do what I want myself?
Oh, I'm getting chills. I am so excited to have you here. I want to talk about the top factor. What is the top factor about leading with bravery that you want workplace leaders out there to know?
Well, I think only when we're brave are we actually able to think outside of the box, be innovative, creative, and explore new ways of doing things. I think we're so good at people pleasing. We're so good at wanting everything to be perfect. And if you want to be brave, you can't. You can't be driven solely by those things. And I think if you really want to lead and make an impact and be a role model, then you have to be willing to try and potentially fail. You have to be willing to do things that are uncomfortable, that may not necessarily be following the status quo or what's expected, but to really carve your own path and figure it out as you go, and look at everything as an experience instead of trying to always get it right and be afraid of wrong, or looking at a success or failure, or one way or another way. It really is about trying and figuring it out as you go, and not feeling like you have to have it all figured out before you start, or all perfect right out of the gates. I think that's so important for leaders to know, because
I feel like social media sort of perpetuates this sort of myth that you need to have your life, your work, your family, and everything be that Pinterest perfect. So I love that you're saying you just need to get out there and have the experience, and it's okay if you don't get it right or you fail. It's the learning and the journey that's really the most important.
Absolutely. And I think I agree with you. I know there's so many pauses that come with social media, but unfortunately we compare ourselves to everyone else's highlight reel, and it's not their reality. And then we feel like, oh, well, unless we look this way, or unless we are going to do it, perfectly, then there's no point in even starting. And I think that's a shame, because exactly as you said, it is a journey. We learn as we go, and some of our biggest lessons come from our biggest setbacks and failures, and so we have to be willing to try.
We talked about bravery at the beginning of the podcast being a teachable skill. Can you talk about that and how our listeners can start learning to be more brave?
Absolutely. So one of the things that's really important about teaching it is to recognize that, first of all, it takes practice, and it starts from doing small steps, but there's various areas, especially in leadership, that you can look at how you can be braver. And to look at brave as an overall concept can sometimes be a bit overwhelming. But if you look specifically at, let's say, your communication, how can I be braver in my communication? We've all heard the term courageous conversations. And, how can I be willing to have an uncomfortable conversation and just choose to be brave? So often we can send an email when it's a tough topic, or we don't really want to see that person face to face. Challenge yourself to be braver, and where you would normally do something that's easy, do something a little bit more challenging. Another thing that you can do is to ask yourself, if I were braver, this is a question I ask people I work with on a regular basis. If I were braver, I would. And complete that phrase. And I make this list for myself on a regular basis. And then challenge yourself to do just one of those things. Even if it's not necessarily in the area where you think that you need to be braver in your work, it's a skill that's actually contagious. And so once you do one small thing, you're like, oh wow, if I can do that, what else can I do? And sometimes a lot of the work that I do is physically getting out of your comfort zone. So we'll do things like axe throwing or skydiving. And I find that when you physically do something that scares you, all of a sudden mentally you're ready to take on something else also.
For all the introverts that are out there, and although I have a presence on social media, I do consider myself kind of an introverted extrovert. So I wanted to ask you, the term brave, it kind of holds this different meaning, like you're big, you're bold, you're out there, you're doing all these things, but maybe you're a little bit more on the introverted side. What advice can you offer people, individuals, those who are listening to the podcast, about how to put themselves out there when maybe that's not really who they are?
Great question. And I think I get this a lot, and a lot of introverts think, oh, they can't be brave. But bravery shows up in so many different ways. And it's not necessarily about putting yourself out there in a bigger way or, being out there on all the social media platforms. It really is about being true to who you are and being brave enough to ask yourself what it is that you want to do that you're not already doing, or whether or not you're really being the biggest version of yourself, which again doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with how you're showing up or putting yourself out there. But are you living true to your values? Are you challenge yourself to learn new things, to take on new activities? Is there somebody that you've always wanted to reach out to that you've been scared to do? Is there someone in your life that you really want to share something with that you haven't been able to, and would really require you getting vulnerable and open and brave? So I think, bravery is comes in so many different ways: physical bravery, psychological bravery, emotional bravery. And so I encourage you to explore you in an area that you might want to be bigger, braver, bolder in. But again, that doesn't necessarily have to mean putting yourself out there in front of the whole world, right? Unless you've always wanted to be a speaker and you're scared a little bit. I think there's a fine line between being uncomfortable and being, in panic zone. So I think it's okay to challenge yourself a little bit without having to change who you are and be inauthentic to what your values are.
Nice. So if you're not somebody who wants to go out there and speak, you don't have to automatically say, oh, I'm going to go speak at the next HR conference and I'm going to lead this presentation. You can do something else. Like you said, axe throwing, skydiving. Maybe it is leading a presentation at work, or doing Mario Andretti's experience and driving a race car. There's it sounds like a lot of different things personally and professionally that you can do to kind of work that, fine tune that brave muscle.
Absolutely. But if you have ideas to share and maybe you don't want to speak in front of an audience, maybe you write an article and you share it around your office or your department, or maybe you have a meeting with a few people in your workplace that you trust to share your ideas. I think it's also the small things too, like raising your hand in a meeting or getting your brave on and asking for a raise or a promotion. I think it's really about getting true to who you are, and to get honest with yourself in terms of where you're playing smaller, where you want to be braver. I mean, if you've never really wanted to speak in front of a large crowd, then don't force yourself to do that. But if you've always wanted to run a 5K and you don't know where to start, well, maybe it's time to either reach out to somebody who's done it and ask them how they started, or read an article about that, or get the app, what is it, from Couch to 5K or something like that, and start challenging yourself to take small moves towards what it is that you want. But only if it's something that excites you, and it's okay to be a bit nervous about it too.
It sounds like being brave isn't like just one thing, like that one thing where like, ta-da, I've done it, I have done this thing. It is a lot of small actions that lead to kind of, I don't know, steamroll, I guess, to that, maybe that bigger, braver thing.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we think, oh, if I do that big thing, then I'll be brave. But if you really think about it, all of the big things that anybody has ever done is really just a combination of small things, small steps that have gotten them somewhere. And I really do think it's a muscle that we need to practice, we need to work, that we need to grow. And And I used to think that it was all about doing these big external actions, to bungee jump or to skydive. And yeah, those things are exciting, but I've also learned that a lot of it is just are these small moments where, you normally would have said no and you're going to say yes. Or as I said, like you raise your hand or you share your idea, you put yourself out there. And I think it really is, it's also about being brave enough to be you and, to recognize that you're enough. And yes, it's good to learn and take on new challenges, but are you really being true to who you are? And are you brave enough to show up in the world exactly as you are right here, right now, without feeling like you need to be somebody else? I think that's a huge part of it.
I love it. Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast sponsored by Clear Company. And we're talking about bravery, how to be more brave in our work and life. Today we are talking with Carole Schulter.
Podcast support provided by Clear Company. Clear Company is a complete talent management platform used by human resources professionals to help them hire, retain, and engage A players with ease. Visit clearcompany.com to sign up for a free personalized demo.
I want to take a step back here and talk a little bit about communication. And you spoke at the SHRM annual conference this year in Las Vegas, and you touched on something that I thought was really important, was that communication and bravery are intertwined, and that communication starts with bravery by going for it. Can you talk about a little bit about the link between those two things?
Absolutely. So I think communication really is such a huge part of our life. One of the lines I sometimes say is the quality of our communication determines the quality of our life. And I think our voice and who we are and how we can express our ideas and build the relationships in life that we want really stems from our ability to be brave enough to use our voice. And a lot of people say, for women especially, we need to find our voice. I don't think we need to find our voice. I think we have a voice. We just need to be brave enough to use it more. And I think that can show up a lot in the workplace too, whether or not you are willing to have those courageous conversations, whether you're willing not to raise your hand and share your ideas at the meeting, whether or not you're willing to, again, ask for a raise or promotion. I mean, 35% of women have never negotiated for anything in their life. And yet a lot of research shows that women who start negotiating from an early stage in their career can make anywhere from $500 to $1 million more over the span of their career than those that don't. And I mean, it's not about the money, but it is about recognizing that you have something to say. Your opinion, your voice, your ideas matter. And I think communication is one of those areas where we can really show how brave we are. And I think it's really important to practice.
I think there's a lot of, in the HR space anyway, this industry, there's a lot of, it's predominantly women, and there are many times women that in their role in HR want more credibility. They want to be trusted. They want to have, I hate this series of words, but the seat at the table where they're with the executive team. And being brave means, in my opinion, like inviting yourself to that meeting, not waiting for the invite, or sitting down with a partner and somebody else in the organization on the executive team and saying, how can we help each other? This is what I want to do. I want to be in these conversations. Which is where I felt like the communication and the bravery piece, like they really, really make sense for HR.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And going back to the phrase I sometimes have people complete, if I were braver, I would. Oftentimes, a lot of it has to do with communication. I would speak up more. I would ask for that raise. I would stand up for myself. I would share my ideas. And so, yeah, communication is definitely one of those ways that women especially do have to be braver. And I agree with you in terms of not waiting for the invite, and inviting yourself or having the courage to ask for feedback or say, this is where I want to go. How can I get there? What do I need to do? What feedback do you have for me? So yeah, I agree 100%.
I think it's an important reminder, and we can't say that enough in the HR industry itself, is that, a lot of times I feel like, and I've been part of this, like you're waiting, like you said, for approval, or you're waiting for respect. I always thought, like when I became 30, because I was very young, I was 22 when I moved into HR, I became a manager. And I always thought, oh man, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have that respect. And so I was waiting for that. And then I realized when I was 30 that it didn't matter how old I was. That wasn't what was going to change it. Everybody else was getting old too. And I had to command that, or work for it, or ask for it in order to get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure you found too, it was just a shift in you realizing, okay, when I'm declaring that I'm ready, then I'm ready. Or when I see that I'm worthy, then it's going to happen. I think you're right. I think age is a tough one too, because I think we do wait until we think we're old enough to be able to deserve or demand that respect. But really, it's whenever you choose it. And when you look at some of these women who just seem so confident, you have no idea necessarily how old they are. They just hold themselves and present themselves so well because they're comfortable in their own skin, and they recognize that they have value. They know their own worth, and they're making things happen.
It's interesting watching my husband, and as I have gotten older, him and I have had more conversations about, because he's seen the way, as a woman, I felt like I wasn't being treated the way I deserved to be. And he noticed it. And his opinion is like, it doesn't matter to him. He just inserts himself into the conversation. He doesn't wait for acceptance. And I think that that's something that I have learned from him. But I also think it sounds like part of what you are teaching and training as women, how they can just be more brave and get that respect and just be confident in who they are.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about your Living Big motto and what that is, and maybe how we can apply it to our daily lives?
Sure. So living big is a phrase, but more than a fun phrase or a mantra or a motto. It really is a way of being. And a lot of it has to do with getting outside your comfort zone. Now, I used to actually have an acronym for BIG, and it was brave, inspired, and getting into action. And so it's about your willingness to do the things that scare you, but also being aligned with who you are. So the inspiration is recognizing that we're all here for a purpose. There's this ancient theory called teleology that talks about the fact every one of us have this telos, this goal, this end, this mission to work towards. But unfortunately, our ability all too often to see it gets blurred because we're so busy looking at what everybody else is doing and so busy comparing ourselves to everyone else and thinking we're supposed to do it that way or do it like this. And so when you're truly on your path, you're living an inspired life. And that's when you're going to feel like you're living your big life. And then finally, G, going for it is really getting into action long before you feel ready. And again, that's where the brave piece comes in as well. Not waiting, not feeling like you've got it all figured out, but doing that first small step and then figuring out what the next one comes after that. So big is really this idea of going after what you want, getting uncomfortable, not having it figured out, knowing that it's going to be messy, but being true to who you are, your values, what's going to make you tick, and ultimately give you the fulfillment and make the impact that you're here to make.
Awesome. I love it. I want to try to live big more every day. I think we all should be working towards that for ourselves and not others.
Absolutely.
What are 3 things you can leave us with? And this is something that you said at the SHRM conference. Stop getting in our way and take action today.
I think one of the big things first is to identify one area or one small thing that you want to change. Is it that you want to change your role? Is it that you want to work out more? Is it that you want to try a new sport or an activity? Really, clarity has to come first. So it's great to say, oh, I'm going to be braver. But if you don't know what that means, or what that translates to, or what area you want to do that in, then it's not going to be measurable. You're not going to necessarily know. So identify one area or one thing that you want to change. And then get real with your excuses. Catch yourself with the old tapes that you're playing or the stories you've been telling yourselves over and over and over again, whether or not it's, oh, I don't have time, I don't have money, my kids are my priority, I'm not a morning person. Really ask yourself, how real is that? Because oftentimes our so-called excuses is just really saying that we're not willing to do it. Not everybody is a morning person, but could you get up an hour or even 30 minutes earlier to get in a workout or a meditation? Yes. But by saying, oh, I can't get up earlier, really it's more like saying you won't get up earlier. So check in with your excuses, catch yourself, and ask yourself, how real is that? And is it that I can't do it? Or is it that I'm just not willing, or I won't do it right now? And then the third thing is challenge yourself to identify one small action that will take you 5 minutes or less that can start the momentum going. So let's say it's that you want to, speak up more in the office. Is there one person that you could have a conversation with, or that you could book a meeting with to finally share your idea? Or is there somebody that you look up to that you would love to have you mentor you? Could you make a phone call or go and see them in person, or, ask what that would take? But try and identify one action that would take 5 minutes or less, because then you can do it. Sometimes we put on our to-do list, write a book, or, get a raise, or run a marathon. Well, that can't be necessarily a thing on the to-do list, but you could say, have a conversation with my supervisor in terms of some areas that I might want to work on, or book a phone call with that person who I know is writing articles and ask them how to get started. So breaking it down and then holding yourself accountable to the first next step that you need to do.
Fantastic. I love it. It's the small things that lead to that bigger goal, or the larger plan that you have.
Absolutely. It helps build momentum, and then, slowly but surely, one day you'll realize, oh, wow, like I'm so much further ahead than when I started. So yeah, it starts small and then build the momentum, build that bravery muscle, and all of a sudden you look back and realize that you're way further up the mountain than you realized.
Suddenly you've recorded 200 podcasts and you don't know how you quite got there.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Good for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, Carole. Where can people go to connect with you and the work that you're doing?
Great question. They can either go to caroleschulte.com, carolschulte.com, or thebraveinstitute.com.
Awesome.
You can also find me on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, all at Carole Schulter _.
Fantastic. This has been an inspiring discussion, and I think we've learned, I know I have, a lot about the BRAVE process, as well as how it impacts workplace leaders. I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to learn from Carole and her perspective on living big. Carole's work at the Brave Institute helps thousands of men and women to get out there and out of their comfort zone and into what we call the brave zone, whether that's surfing, getting a promotion, or achieving the impossible. We all can be brave, but in small, or maybe large, but meaningful and impactful ways that help us achieve our personal goals and dreams. I'm thinking about some brave goals for myself, and I thought I would share. I want to give a TED Talk, and I will say that I have a fear of public speaking. It gets me still every time, so I want to do more of that. I want to work more closely with female domestic abuse survivors. I am also a female domestic abuse survivor. I also want to launch an HR growth and development mentorship and membership program designed to help inspire HR leaders, so we can kind of take Workology to the next level. Thank you for joining the Workology podcast sponsored by Clear Company. This podcast is for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. This is Jessica Miller Merrill. Until next time, visit workology.com to listen to all our podcast episodes.